Hi everyone, and welcome back to A Girl Talks Formula One. With you, Manena, and I know it's been a while since I've brought an interview in English, but we're doing it in the best way with a female driver, Canadian Megan Gilkes. Hi Megan, and welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you, and thank you so much for having me on.
Of course, thank you so much for being here. So before we start, you are Canadian, but your accent is very British. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I am Canadian, like you say. I have an English dad, so my dad's side of the family is English. So I kind of, I guess, grew up picking up the accent. And I am also living in the UK now. I've been living in the UK for the past 5.5, 6 years. So yeah, I guess I'm starting to pick up the accent a little bit as well. But when I'm in Canada, people think I sound a bit British. When I'm over here in the UK, people think I sound Canadian. So
Story of my life. Like, I've lived in so many places as well that you never really belong anywhere. Like, you belong to the world, I feel. It's like when you're in your hometown or in your home country, people are like, oh, you're not Canadian or you're not Mexican enough to be here because I'm Mexican. But then you go to other places where you've lived for a long time and they're like, but you're not from here either. So it's a weird situation.
yeah, I've always been pretty lucky. People kind of are like, "Oh, welcome to wherever I am." So yeah, it's been pretty nice. But I do definitely count myself as a Canadian, very patriotic Canadian.
I know. I mean, my passport's Canadian, but I am not Canadian at all. Like, at
Right.
all. So let's get started with your racing experience. So, if you've competed in quite a few categories, we're going to get a little bit into that in a while. But tell us, how did you get started in motorsports and what made you want to become a driver and get in this whole sport in general?
So I got involved in motorsport really just from the first time I drove a go-kart. I tried a go-kart out when I was living in Barbados, so yet another place that I live. So I totally get you coming from all over the world. But yeah, I grew up in Barbados from the age of 6 to 12, and I started karting over there. And from the first time I drove, I absolutely loved it. I thought, yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to be involved in motorsport, and I saw Formula One as the pinnacle of motorsport that I wanted to get to someday.
And was your family ever involved in the sport? And I don't mean supporting you, but like, I mean, obviously they support you, that's why you're here. But I mean, more like in the sport, as in like, you saw someone and you were like, oh, yeah, my dad used to drive go-karts or my brother or whatever.
Yeah, so my dad used to race single seaters, and then before that, my grandfather used to race minis. So I do come from a bit of a racing heritage in that sense. And I have a younger brother as well. I'm the oldest child, but I have a younger brother who's currently racing in Euro Cup 3. And so he's racing Formula Regional cars around Europe. And yeah, I guess we're quite a racing family.
That is so nice. So let's get started with your career. When did you start competing professionally, which eventually led you to race in W Series, Formula One Academy, etc.? So when did you start competing professionally?
So professionally, my first season of, as you would put it, proper professional racing was the W Series in 2019. Before that, I had raced in Formula V in Canada and the US, and Formula 2000 a little bit in the US. I'd just done a couple of races. And I saw the opportunity for the W Series. I saw that was a great chance for me to try and get my name out there on the world stage and compete against some of the best women in the world. And I knew I was very inexperienced. I'd never raced anything beyond Formula V and Formula 2000 prior to that. But I put my name down. I tried out, did all the selection events, and managed to get selected as one of the 18 drivers to race on the inaugural grid of the W Series in 2019. So that was really my first season of professional racing, and it was my first time racing in Europe, first time racing on live television. So it was very exciting for me.
That is so nice, especially because it did open a lot of doors for you. I mean, you got to become a winner in W Series, in GB4, In F1600, from all the categories that you've raced on, which one do you think is the most challenging up to date?
That's quite a difficult question because I think every series was competitive. Every series had its challenges that I faced. Probably, I would say the most out and out competitive in terms of experienced drivers would actually be Formula Ford in the UK because the years that I was doing it, there was such a strong grid of extremely competitive drivers, many of whom were veterans of the sport and who had been racing for many years, won the Formula Ford Festival and the Walter Hayes Trophy. So I was really competing against some really good drivers in Formula Ford, including
And
some
men
who went.
as well, right?
Sorry?
Men as well.
Yes, yeah. I was actually, for the most part during the season, I think I was the only girl on the grid. And I think at the end of the year, there was a couple in the big races like the Formula Ford Festival. But during the majority of the season in 2021, if I remember correctly, I was the only girl on the grid. So yeah, it was
Awesome.
ultimately just a grid of really strong drivers and really experienced drivers. And I learned a lot from competing in such a tough championship.
That is amazing. And then later on, last season specifically, you drove as well for Rodan Carlin in Formula One Academy. So you've basically been a pioneer in both categories, part of the pioneering group. What has this been like, especially because it's two categories that are specifically made for women?
Yeah, it was an interesting experience and both of them felt quite different. When I was in the W series, it was my first year, like I said before, of professional racing, and it was all really new to me. I didn't really know what to expect. I went in with fairly low expectations, and as you mentioned earlier, I ended up winning a race. So that was super exciting, and that race in Aston was one of the best days ever. I really, really enjoyed it, and it was really cool to have been able to say I won a race in a Formula 3 championship. And then in the F1 Academy, it was a bit of a different experience for me. I was a bit more experienced in racing, a few years older as well. I went from being the youngest driver on the grid in the W series to one of the older ones in the F1 Academy. So I went in with very different expectations, and then I just didn't really have a very good season at all for a number of reasons. But yeah, it was just a very different mindset going into each of them, and it kind of defined my season in a different way.
100%. And you got to meet Susie Wolf, obviously, right? Tell us about this experience because she is one of the most powerful people in motorsports nowadays, but at the same time she's just so humble and she seems so kind. So tell us a little bit about what it was like to meet Susie Wolf and if you ever got starstruck or anything.
I wouldn't say I got starstruck because I've got some pretty cool people in my life.
You
So
have to tell us about that.
it was really cool to meet her, to meet a woman who has driven an F1 car, a modern F1 car, who's done free practice sessions with an F1 team. That was awesome. A fantastic role model for all the girls on the grid to look up to, hopefully not just get to the point where they're competing in FP1 sessions, but hopefully eventually racing in F1 as well. So yeah, I think it's really cool that Susie was able to start an initiative like this, and hopefully it continues to build momentum.
Yeah, I honestly couldn't think of a better person to have become the CEO of Formula One Academy since she has opened so many doors for so many women, especially female drivers in motorsports. So that's been great. And you were saying that you've met so many amazing people. Tell us a little bit about who has actually made you starstruck, or who have you met that you went like, whoa, I can't believe I'm meeting this person?
Well, I would say in terms of females in the motorsport industry, definitely I have to say the coolest woman that I've met in motorsport was my first ever driver coach, Davina Galitza. She
Wow.
she qualified in Formula One. She never actually qualified to race in an
Yeah,
event, but that was in the 70s. She competed in a few qualifying sessions. And she was also an
exactly.
Olympic skier, and she's, kept her hand in with lots of racing ever since her F1 days. And I just think she's absolutely amazing. And the fact that she's been my first driver coach, and I've kept in touch with her over the years, and she's come along to coach me at some races in the W Series, and even more recently than that as well, and in USF3. So I've been super lucky to be able to be in touch with Davina, and she's a massive role model to me, and I think she should be a role model to any woman in motorsport or any woman
Definitely.
in sport. As well as Davina, just some of the really cool people who I've got to meet through my job. So I work as an engineer at Aston Martin Formula One, and meeting the drivers, getting to work with the likes of Felipe Drugovich as well. I think
Yeah.
he's an excellent driver. He was testing with the Aston Martin F1 team last season, working with Jess Hawkins too. It was really cool to just get to work with so many amazing drivers. And then in terms of being starstruck, I wouldn't say I've been starstruck, but there's just some fantastic racing drivers, fantastic engineers that I've got the opportunity to meet and to work with. So I'm in a really privileged position to get to know some pretty cool people.
You truly are. And speaking of Felipe Drugovich, he's also not bad to look at, so you're lucky there.
Can't comment because he's
Can't comment, but
always
can't complain. That is so funny. I remember following his career precisely the year he won Formula 2. I mean, I had been following it for a little bit before he won, and I always thought, I don't know when, but that guy is gonna win eventually Formula 2. So I honestly can't wait to see him drive for Formula One, especially because, I mean, there's so many rumors that Checo Perez is leaving soon. And we definitely do need a Latino driver in Formula One. So he would be like the perfect driver to come and replace Checo, because a lot of people go like, who's going to be the next Mexican? It's not only about that. I mean, there's so many Latin drivers out there, Felipe Drugovich included, for example, and all of these Mexican drivers coming up are so young. So I still don't see when they might join Formula One. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. And
yeah, definitely.
precisely, you were saying that you're working as an engineer in Aston Martin. Tell us a little bit about how this started. Because I remember when I first contacted you, you started working for Aston Martin, precisely.
Yeah. So I actually started off as an undergraduate placement in a department called trackside support. And that department is essentially working with the race engineering team, mainly from the factory in mission control on the race weekends, and then in the factory pre-event and post-event, looking through data, doing data analysis, and helping to try and optimize the setup of the car to make it go faster, and to try and be as far near the front as we possibly can be during the races. So I started out as an undergraduate placement with Aston Martin, and then at the end of my placement, I was offered a full-time job there. So I'm now working as, I guess technically, I'm a graduate performance engineer. I'm still finishing my degree at university. I've finished all my exams now. I'm just doing my final dissertation, and then once I've finished at university, I'll be going back full time. And for now, I'm just doing part time, sort of half a month every month to keep my hand in and keep helping
Of
out the team where I
course.
can.
That's amazing. I mean, you're so multitask. You do everything at the same time. And precisely, I wanted to ask you, so especially for aspiring young female drivers, how do you balance, university and when you used to race for W Series and for Formula One Academy? What did your weeks look like?
Yeah, it was really difficult to be able to balance everything, because you want to be able to put 110% into each thing that you do, but there just isn't enough hours in the day. And as well as that, you still need to sleep, and you need to eat, and you need to look after yourself. Being sort of in my first year of university when I did the W Series, and competing for my first ever season of professional racing, it was really difficult to find a balance. And I did feel as though I didn't do either of the two things to my full potential as if I'd been focused on one or the other. So it's definitely very difficult to strike a proper balance. And I found myself, getting up at 6 a.m. to train in the gym because the Formula Regional cars are extremely physical to drive, and I'm not exactly a strongly built individual naturally. So I had to work really hard in the gym, do lots of training, trying to lift lots of weights to get strong enough just to be competitive in these cars, let alone to be able to, outperform my competition. So there was lots of training, trying to spend time on the simulator where I could. And between that, traveling to and from events, racing at the events, doing any media activities that the W Series required. And all of that while you're trying to study for an aeronautical engineering degree. So it was extremely busy. And if I were to go back, I know there was ways that I would have gone about it a bit differently, ways I would have split my time differently. But ultimately, I'm really glad that I got the experience of racing in the W Series. I think that set me off on a great path.
Of course.
And the university, I wouldn't have the job that I have now if I wasn't on a path to be getting an engineering degree. So yeah, definitely both had to be done. There was no question. You can't pass up on an opportunity like the W Series, but it was very difficult to manage everything all at once.
Yeah, I bet it was super overwhelming, especially because it sounds like you barely had any time off for yourself. But you are right. I mean, precisely the position that you have right now is a dream job for so many people, especially because nowadays I feel that there's many more people that actually want to work in Formula One teams rather than become a driver itself, you know? So,
Yeah.
changing a little bit the subject and talking about Formula One, did you have an opportunity to watch the Miami race in which Lando Norris won? Finally, another driver that's not Max Verstappen winning. And it's also Lando Norris's first win of his career. That was so exciting to watch.
Yeah, so I guess you can say I watched the Miami race. I was actually working in mission control. So
Okay,
I was watching our two drivers and
right.
keeping an eye on what Fernando and Lance were doing and looking through all of their data. So actually, it's really interesting when in mission control, you're so focused on your own cars that you quite often lose the picture of the rest of the race for everything that isn't pertinent to what's happening with your cars
Right.
and what you don't expect to be happening to your cars. So quite often, if you aren't right at the front, then you'll miss some of the things that happen right at the front. And if you're not at the back, you'll miss some of the things that happen at the back. So yeah, I guess I kind of watched the race. I didn't have the sort of TV audio going or anything like that, so I wasn't really listening into any commentary. But you would sort of check in on how the rest of the race is going beyond your two cars
Right.
intermittently. And yeah, it was definitely an interesting race. It was pretty cool to see a different driver at the front. Of course, I'm wishing that that could be Lance or Fernando.
Of
And
course.
hopefully very soon it will be. But yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting what happened with the safety car. And yeah, just sort of seeing how a very, very different scenario played out for all the drivers.
Very different, especially because it was a very strategic race in which, because of the safety cars, any driver could have won. You know, I love Max Verstappen, but we obviously want to see different drivers winning. I mean, besides him, there's only been two other drivers that have won a race this season. So it was definitely very interesting to see who was going to win the race because we know what happened with Lando when he had that first opportunity of his first win in Silverstone a couple of years ago, in which he was just so attached to the idea of winning that he didn't really listen to his engineers at that moment. And then it started raining, and from first, he ended up in seventh. So it finally happened, and everything just worked perfectly. And I mean, it definitely has been one of the most interesting races of the season, despite the Miami circuit layout, which is probably not the most interesting, but the race was definitely full of surprises.
Yeah, it definitely was, and yeah, like you say, it's nice to see lots of different drivers at the front. It's good for the sport when it's really competitive at the front. You always want to see a battle for the lead. You don't want to see someone
Of
clearing off
course.
20 seconds in the distance, and having a whole pit window to be able to box and do the fastest lap at the end of the race. That's not really what the viewers tune in to see. So it is nice to see the grid mixing up a little bit. And yeah, like I say, hopefully you'll see some green at the front soon too.
Hopefully, because I mean, Fernando is one of the biggest drivers in the Latin American community as well. So obviously, whenever we don't see Checo on the podium, we love to see Fernando, of course. And I mean, everybody loves Lance Stroll as well, but I'm talking as a Mexican, you know? So there goes my comment. And before we leave, tell us a little bit about what you do in your job in Aston Martin.
So my job is to help to make the car go as fast as possible. I'm not involved really in designing parts that go on the car.
Right.
What I and my department do is we set about looking through the data pre-event, after the event, in the event, to try and figure out what we can do to make the car go faster with the parts that are on the car at the moment, with any setup changes we can make, and also with driver feedback as well, because even the best drivers in the world, there's so much going on, there's so
Of
many
course.
things in a modern F1 car. There's the strategy side of it, there's the sort of how much you use the tires, there's an absolute fortune that the drivers need to know, all the tools that they have access to in the car to be able to control things while they're on the circuit. It's amazing the amount of data that the drivers are given. So actually being able to feed back to them is sort of part of what we do in our department. And
That's
yeah,
awesome.
basically the entire job is make the race car go as fast as possible.
That's amazing. And I would say that an advantage that you have is that you have also been a driver. So you definitely know how the car works, not from the outside, but being on an actual race car. So that's pretty cool as well. And do you get to ever travel because of your job or no?
So I've so far done some of the testing events with the team. That's when I got
Nice.
the opportunity to work with Felipe and with Jess Hawkins, which that has been really cool getting to do that and get some experience trackside. And yeah, hopefully in the future I'll be a traveling performance engineer. And yeah, in the meantime, I'm working in mission control and helping out from there, which I absolutely love. Mission control is my favorite part of the job. So yeah, I'm just every day is like a dream come true for me, going in and getting to do the job that I get to do.
I know, and that's the kind of job that we all want. Waking up actually excited to go to work, not like, ugh, I have to go to work again. So that's
Yeah,
amazing. I mean, congratulations, Megan. And
thank you.
what advice would you give young girls that want to not only be a race car driver, but that also want to work in a Formula One team? Because there's so many more opportunities for women every single day. So yeah, tell us.
Yeah, I would absolutely say the best thing to do is to get stuck in and get involved from as young of an age as you possibly can. And there is no age that's really too old to work in Formula One. And there's so many different job opportunities. It's not just being a driver, it's not just being an engineer. There's mechanics,
Exactly.
the financial side, there's the marketing side. There is so much going on in a Formula
Right.
One team. So many opportunities. And for me, I'd say just getting experience in whatever it is you want to do. If you want to be a driver, that might mean getting out and doing some karting for the first time. If you want to be an engineer, that might mean going and, working on your road car a bit, or working with a team in a junior category like F4, for example. I'd just say any experience that you can get in doing what you want to do will pay off in the future, because nowadays it's experience that counts big.
100%. That's great advice. And thank you so much for being on the podcast. And
No
I wish
problem.
you the best of success in your future career. And I'm sure you're going to do great. And it's so nice to see someone talk so passionately about what they do. So
Well, thank you.
congrats.
Yeah, I'm so lucky to be in this position. I absolutely love it. And thank you so much for having me on the show.
Of course. And thank you guys so much for coming all the way to the end of the interview. See you on the next interview in A Girl Talks Formula One. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.